whether right or wrong, proper or improper, just letting y'all know that these things are here to stay forever. So this video is going to be on additional markup that you could have and some other tidbits about HTML. Now, one thing that I do like to use sometimes, and I don't ever try to push this to production code or anything along those lines, but this is a comment. So you could have whatever you want to in here. We could click save, come in, refresh, and you'll see that it just doesn't show up anywhere on the page. If we're to go down, click right or right click and then inspect it. Expand this all the way out. Let's look inside the body because this is going to be, a child of the body tag. Wrong click there. We can see the comment resides in here. So if we were to put down hey, I'm hungry, come into here, we would see that updates here. Now, I don't know why you would always or typically use comments when you are putting stuff into production, so like official websites, but I have seen it before. If you go and use the developer tools, which we'll talk about at a later time, you will be able to go in, and some companies have these things called bounties. So if you could find a way to make their website run faster, they're willing to pay you a few bucks. You'll see cute little things hidden inside of websites here and there for other web developers to see. Is doing a bounty for a corporation worth, maybe the $200 they give you, whereas that in turn delivers a net extra $50,000 a year for them? I'm not so sure, but just letting you know that stuff is out there. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at, besides all this, is Ids and Classes. So we're going to have some text in here. This is a section on markup. On, not of. Markup. So if I wanted to come into here, I could give something an ID. And so let's just name this first ID. And an ID is something that uniquely, and the word is uniquely here, identifies this one thing. If I had even if it's the same text down below, this is a section on markup, I would have to have a second, something like this, a second ID, because these are for uniquely identifying particular sections of your web page. So you're thinking, okay, well, it's targeting it, it's giving it this value that is unique. What if I wanted to start grouping stuff together? Because we now need to start thinking about CSS and styling stuff. And so sometimes you're going to want to target particular parts of the page individually, in which case you could do stuff like this. Sometimes, though, you want to group things together stylistically or whatever it is you may be doing. And that would be through using a thing called a class. So we could have something like page text. You could come in here, and this is fine. You could have everything on your page could have the same class, and it'll be okay. And say you want to add a second class to it. All you need to do is come up here and have something like second class. So this would have the page text, and then this would also have the page text, which isn't breaking any rules. But then over here you would have second class, so this would have an additional attribute tied to it, where this would not. And for right now, this may not make a ton of sense, but just know this is a couple of the ways that we're going to be able to style our page and target certain sections of it in a couple videos. The last thing I want to talk about here is, well, these two things called a div and a span. You're going to see a div, which I believe stands for divide, way more than a span, even though you're most likely going to see the two a ton, especially as you get into higher level frameworks, libraries. Divs are probably, or I would say, in my history of front-end development, the element that I've used more than anything. It's kind of like a catch-all for grouping stuff together. Why did it do that? That is so strange. Anyways, let's do this here. So we have this div here, and then let's just put in an h2 tag here. This is inside of a div. I'm going to click save. We're going to refresh. We're going to save this, and let's just make another one. And so the question is, we know that this is a block level, so this is going to shove everything down below it. So say we had another header tag, we had a paragraph tag, whatever else it would be, wouldn't necessarily have to go below an H2. The question is that the same for a div? Well, let's find out. And it is true. It is 100% true. That's because divs are block level elements as well. So that means all the contents that come after it are shoved down. Now, what about a span? A span is, you could think of it as an inline equivalent of a div, though I've seen them used for different purposes depending upon what you want to group together. Sometimes you want to group stuff maybe inside of a div or another element, and you don't want it to take up any more space than necessary. We hit refresh here, and we see that inside everything looks the same. If we wanted to come back in later with some styling, we could add an ID or an ID, or we could add a class. But spans, as you can see here, are not taking up any more space than they need. If we go here and click inspect, we'll click on this, and we can see that this word inside is between the opening and closing span element here, and it's not shoving any text around, which is pretty neat. So what I'm trying to tell y'all right now is get used to at least seeing a lot of divs in your careers, especially as you go into things like React. I use a zillion divs in my React projects, and you'll see most of them out there too. They are almost to the point of other elements you will see. Divs will just take over some of even the basic elements I've shown you in this tutorial series so far. Whether right or wrong, proper or improper, just letting y'all know that these things are here to stay forever.